So this is a lecture from chapter 5. It's specifically on taste, smell, and the other senses. So a quote I like for this chapter is, "Nothing revives the past so completely as a smell that was once associated with it." And I can't remember if it says this in your textbook, but smell is actually the biggest trigger for memories. You can look that up if you're more interested in it, but more than any other sense, smell can trigger a memory of something in the past for us. So let's look at the chemical senses. Taste or gustation and smell or olfaction are called chemical senses because both have sensory receptors that respond to molecules in the food we eat or in the air we breathe. There is a pronounced interaction between our chemical senses, and we probably all knew that taste and smell kind of go hand in hand. For example, when we describe the flavor of a given food, we are really referring to both gustatory and olfactory properties of the food working in combination. And again, like I said, we all know that smell and taste kind of go hand in hand, and you can see from the diagram, there's our taste sensors and our smell sensors, and they both go in together to complete or let us interpret what is the flavor of the food we're eating. So those are the chemical senses. A little more about taste or gustation. There are sweet, salty, sour, and bitter, and one that I really hadn't heard before is called umami, which is a Japanese word that roughly translates to yummy, and it is associated with a taste for monosodium glutamate, or MSG. Monosodium glutamate, again MSG, is used to make food taste better. It is a form of the amino acid glutamic acid. Both are naturally in food, such as cheese, tomatoes, mushrooms, and meat. Glutamate, however, is not related to gluten, so don't confuse it with that. There's also a growing body of experimental evidence suggesting that we possess a separate taste for the fatty content of a given food. So perhaps, we all learned in school there's sweet, salty, sour, bitter, but perhaps there's two more types of taste we have. And the next diagram here, I show where those sensory areas are. You can see sour is on the side, bitter is in the back, the new one, umami, is in the middle, and then sweet and salty are at the front. So kind of interesting facts, especially about the umami. So let's look further at taste buds, a little closer to the tongue. Taste buds are formed by groupings of taste receptor cells with hair-like extensions that protrude into the central pore of the taste bud. Taste buds have a life cycle, often days to 2 weeks. So you can see just a more specific diagram on the right where there's taste hairs, pore, the little cells, supporting cell, and then it goes to nerve fibers. I think the most interesting thing for me is that our taste buds only have the life cycle of days to weeks. I wouldn't have thought of that before I learned that they were very temporary, but I found that interesting. So let's look a little bit further at smell. Olfactory receptor cells are located in a mucous membrane at the top of the nose. Small hair-like extensions from these receptors serve as the sites for odor molecules dissolved in the mucus to interact with chemical receptors located on these extensions. Once an odor molecule has bound a given receptor, chemical changes within the cell result in signals being sent to the olfactory bulb. The olfactory bulb is a bulb-like structure, obviously, at the tip of the frontal lobe of the brain, where the olfactory nerves begin. From the olfactory bulb, information is sent to regions of the limbic system and to the primary olfactory cortex, which is located very near, again, the gustatory cortex. Again, an explanation of how smell and taste are related. So this is a picture, just a basic picture of what we just talked about in the last slide. There's an odor, obviously, from the rose, and then the odor goes into the nasal cavity, hits the olfactory neurons, goes to the olfactory bulb, and hits the limbic system of the brain. And along with taste, that allows us to have a flavor. So we've looked at smell and taste. Let's look briefly at touch. Meissner's corpuscle is something you'll see discussed in the book, I believe. It is a type of encapsulated nerve ending located in the skin. More specifically, it is located in the superficial portions of the dermis, which is the skin. Meissner's corpuscle is responsible for transmitting the sensations of light touch and low-frequency vibrations from the periphery to the central nervous system. Meissner's corpuscles are most densely concentrated in the portions of the skin that are sensitive to light touch, especially in the palms, fingers, and lips, which I'm sure you can imagine our palms and our fingers and our lips are very sensitive to light touch, very sensitive to any touch. So that's mostly where they're located. Pacinian corpuscles are specialized mechanoreceptors located deep within the skin, as well as in other tissues, such as joints and the peritoneum, responsible for detecting deep pressure. So located deeper in the skin, more likely to detect deep pressure. Merkel's discs are occurring in the outer layer, the epidermis, of hairless skin that responds to sustained pressure. It is named after German anatomist Friedrich S. Merkel. These discs are found in large numbers in the fingertips, where they are important in discriminating textures and shapes. So again, our fingers are very, very sensitive and can really detect, again, as it says, textures and shapes. One more, the Ruffini corpuscles are primarily located in the reticular dermis of fingertips and joints. Due to their location, these receptors are primarily responsible for sensing pressure and slippage of objects along the surface of the skin. Since these receptors adapt slowly, they can detect a non-moving, which would mean static, or sustained stimulus. So let's look at thermoception, which refers to the body's ability to feel temperature changes. Thermal receptors on the skin register both heat and cold, which makes sense, and abrupt changes in temperatures before transmitting that information to the brain by means of the sensory nerves. So if you look at this is called the thermoception pleasure model. So think of it like a pendulum swinging from cold to hot. Slow movement in the lower levels from cold to hot or hot to cold causes pleasure. Quick change from painful to warm causes relief, and very quick changes cause confusion. Our body is very confused by quick changes. So you can see on the cold and hot, there's a certain level at which it's painful, excruciating. For example, sunbathing, which would be an unwelcoming sense, cheerful and soothing and exciting. So the thermoception pleasure model is a good example of how hot and cold can both go from painful to pleasure. And again, think of it as a pendulum that swings back and forth. Pain perception. Inflammatory pain is pain that signals some type of tissue damage. For example, if you stub your toe, obviously you've damaged the tissue of your toe, and that would be inflammatory pain. On the other hand, neuropathic pain is nerve pain, also called neuralgia or neuropathic pain. It occurs when there is damage to your nerves due to disease or injury. Nerve pain has been described as feeling like a shooting or stabbing pain, a burning sensation, almost like an electric shock, like pins and needles, or tingling. So inflammatory pain and neuropathic pain are a little bit different in how our body perceives those two. Let's move on to the vestibular sense, also known as the movement, gravity, and or balance sense, allows us to move smoothly. We are able to maintain our balance while engaged in activities because of this sense. While vestibular helps us with balance while we walk and run, it also helps us stay upright when we sit and stand. So again, you can see on the left, vestibular is the balance sense. It helps with, as we just mentioned, moving smoothly. Walking up and down stairs without tripping, riding a bike or skateboard, helps us maintain a sense of balance, riding a moving vehicle or rocking back and forth. Helps us sit and stand upright, sliding down a slide and staying upright, or maintaining simply an upright posture. So that's what the vestibular sense does. And I think that's closing our lecture on the taste, smell, and other senses. A quote, you all know I like quotes, but another quote I wanted to close with is, "The senses, being the explorers of the world, open the way to knowledge." So as always, thank you for listening, and please let me know if you have any questions.